Welcome back. Welcome to the 44th episode of Coffee with Krav. So grab your coffee, your drinks, grab whatever you'd like, because we're going to have an excellent conversation. And with Coffee with Krav, I like to have conversations with different people from different walks of life where I look to educate, entertain, and have some fun. But in life, you might have family members, friends, people you know, even yourself that have gone through traumatic situations. Some of them can be stress related and create tremendous anxiety and phobias and panic disorders and PTSD and so on. These issues, left untreated, will cause tremendous stress for yourself, for your family, for your friends. We're very fortunate today to have a renowned expert in the field of trauma and stress-based disorders. In addition, with everything that's going on in this country and around the world, I can't think of a better person to have on. So without further ado, let me read Dr. Kate Truitt's bio. And it's a big bio.
Oh,
I had to cut it down. I cut it. No, I
Yeah.
cut it down. I cut it down. Dr. Kate Truitt is a clinical psychologist, applied neuroscientist, and an international best-selling author renowned for her groundbreaking work in the field of trauma, stress, and resilience. Dr. Truitt has dedicated her life to understanding the brain's ability to transcend and transform the complex relationship between nature and nurture. Dr. Truitt's clinical practice, scientific studies, and trainings are specialized in the treatment of PTSD, complex trauma, panic disorders, anxiety, phobia, and other stress-related disorders. Her voice in the mental health arena extends to her role as a speaker and media consultant, including features on BBC and Today, and also speaking at prestigious platforms like the United Nations and the United States Department of Defense. Her best-selling books, Keep Breathing and Healing in Your Hands, have helped many, many, many people. So today we have the privilege of exploring her groundbreaking research and learning from her extensive experience in helping individuals overcome trauma and stress. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kate Truitt to Coffee with Krav. Welcome. Welcome.
It is such a delight to be here. And I want to again extend my gratitude for rescheduling our original date that we had on the calendar. It's speaking of resilience, I was reflecting on this morning as I was getting dressed, and when I popped on, I have a neck brace, I've got my old faithful cane here as I'm recovering from a pretty severe car accident. And I was thinking about how resilience, when it's such a perfect topic for today, not just because of what's been unfolding the past several weeks, but also what I've been navigating lately and the power of our opportunity and really building brain partnership with ourselves so that when life happens, when somebody runs a red light, we have almost the automatic capacity to start to heal and weather the storm in a really powerful way, because there's a lot of storms brewing right now, as you highlighted. So again, thank you for your flexibility, and I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so happy that you're on the road to recovery, and we'll dig into that, and we'll dig into a whole bunch of other things. But let's go backwards. Let's go backwards. Let's start going back to your childhood. You grew up in Kansas, right?
I did. The Midwestern girl.
Okay. So, what are some of the early lessons that you learned growing up in Kansas?
I come from, they're still my family. Uh, two parents who were very, very strong, they were entrepreneurial, they made their way in the world. And they modeled in some really powerful ways, for better, for worse, in some instances, the need for autonomy and independence. And in our household, there wasn't a lot of room for feelings and emotions. Everything was always fine. And I'd say that's also generational. I'm 1980s baby. And the impact of being taught and having the modeling around being independent and strong, and I would even say fierce in some respects, with a missing piece of having the ability to talk about and feel emotions and have emotions be okay, created it's like a tornado in my brain, using a Kansas analogy here,
Mhm.
Wizard of Oz. And it's almost as though in growing up in that dynamic, I had to go on my own little Oz journey to learn about who I was as a human and learn about how humans existed in the world, what feelings actually were. And
Wow.
that was a huge part of how I ended up doing the work I do now.
So as a youngster growing up in Kansas, did you ever imagine yourself going on to becoming a best-selling author, a globally recognized clinical psychologist?
You know, I
Was that
always,
ever in, is anyone in in those fields at all at home?
oh no, not at all. My mother is a general contractor. I mean, but even back in the 60s and the 70s, running construction sites, commercial and real estate. So if she can, she's tough as nails. And my dad's, he was in sales, worked at Coors, VP of Coors for a long time, and then moved into the family business with his brother. So this, like I said, feelings were not on the table. So being a psychologist was not even a thing I knew. It was a thing, to be honest.
So they were more entrepreneurial, sounds
Yeah,
like.
which I also am an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and so that certainly seeped into my blood. That's part of my cellular membranes. And I always knew wanted to write, but I wanted to be a romance novel author.
Hmm. Interesting.
So I mean, start, like when I was younger, preteen, kind of middle school, high school romance books.
Did you
So
ever write any? Did you ever
I
write?
did. I
Hmm.
did. I did. I started writing when I was around 12 years old. It has never seen and probably never will see the light of day, but it's still very tender in my heart.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, you had shared with me, and I hope you don't mind sharing with the audience about a traumatic experience that you had with your fiance, which really, kind of gave you this road, so to speak. So, if you don't mind, can you share that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and even pulling it back a little bit before that, the only reason I got into mental health to begin with was because all the way in my early 20s, I was struggling with really severe anxiety and depression. And I didn't know how to make heads nor tails of it. And so I started studying it. And so by 2009, which is when the incident you're referencing happened, I was completing my doctorate. I already had two
Mm.
master's degrees, my master's in psychology, psychophysiology, which is neuroscience, and then an MBA specialized in healthcare administration. And as I was wrapping up my doctoral program, my partner of 10 years unexpectedly passed away. And he died a week before our wedding.
Ah,
He had been unwell for a while, and his doctors had been prescribing him high levels of opioids and benzodiazepines.
oh, wow.
And he accidentally overdosed. And I came home and I was unable to save his life when I found him.
Oh my God.
That transformed my life, as one might imagine, in so many big ways, but also was the inception point of my focus on resilience. I was a trauma specialist. That was my focus prior to the
Don't
law.
they go hand in glove, those two
You,
things?
yeah, well, you would think. I mean,
Yeah.
what a smart reflection, Mark. But in the field of mental health and psychology, so many of us were trained, especially back then, to only focus on the symptoms and the darkness.
Mm.
There wasn't Positive psychology was an emerging field. It wasn't part of my educational program at all. And so when I was tumbled into the world of PTSD, and when I was 29, 30 years old, I felt so adrift, even though I knew what was happening in the brain. I knew how to treat people with trauma. I didn't know how to help myself because I hadn't been taught those skills either in my education or in any of my life's work, oddly
So,
enough.
so did you have to self-teach yourself, or you went through schooling, or a combination of both? What'd you do with that?
I did both, a lot of both. And this is actually, interestingly enough, which is, I think, is a good connection point with the work that you do, Mark, and your audience does. Coming from that entrepreneurial background, I had read a lot of like Stephen Covey's work
Mm,
and How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is such a weird title for a really great book that's all about self-acceptance and building confidence and resilience, really.
mm,
And so I went back to those books and said, okay, I've got PTSD. I don't know how to live with this right now. I was in therapy. I had a great psychologist, but how do I build the skills up that my brain needs if I'm going to have PTSD for the rest of my life, which I thought I truly might at that point. And I also got very sick right after John passed on with a brain virus and had brain damage. And so I was really just looking at how do I transform my experience of myself and my body if this is my life now, which in a way is a foundational part of resilience.
yeah, 100%. And what I love as I was doing some research for this Coffee with Krav, you have some fantastic resources with your YouTube videos. I have to say, and you touch on some very interesting topics, and I'm going to go over some of them. One of the things I really enjoyed was your A plus B
Mhm.
equals C. So for the audience, can you define the A, the B, the C, the D, the whole thing,
Yeah, yeah.
please?
So I want to, as an applied neuroscientist, my job is to be a translator.
Mm,
Brains can feel really intimidating and wacky and weird. The word neuroscience can feel overwhelming. And so my job is to just be like, nah, it's just kind of things that are, it's like building blocks and what's impacting what blocks are being chosen. Are we going with mortar? Are we going with concrete or steel? And so the A
your mom
plus,
would be proud, by the way.
yeah, she would be. I
Uh,
used to tag along around beside her at all the construction sites. It's amazing I'm still alive. So one of the things I'm always reflecting on with my clients and when in my trainings for people is just the simple reminder that things happen. Now that seems really basic. And but the idea that things happen means that something happens and it changes the way our brain and our body are functioning when something happens. That's the A, that's the beginning inception point. And so it could be something amazing. We were talking about the market update when we first logged in here. Oh, there was a big upswing this morning. Okay, whew, that's good. I'm looking at my stock going, that feels a little better right now. Okay, that was a little anxiety producing. Something happened last week where I was like, oh no, just hang in there. So that something changed the way my brain and body was processing information around people. Okay. So there's something that happens. That something that happens is that behavioral response I just described. Brain and body is the B. What is brain and what is body doing because something happened? And then the C is the synthesis of it. And if it's a good thing, C is great. A plus B equals C. There's a consequence. And if it's a positive consequence, we're like, yay, woohoo, life is good. Okay. But if it's a less than preferable consequence or a negative consequence, oftentimes we'll create a way to deal with the situation, the B, to change the experience of the C and develop a different behavior. In the equation, that different behavior may be substance use. It may be doom scrolling. It may be spending hours and hours and hours scrolling through different news sites or kitten videos on TikTok. Whatever it might be that helps dissociate the system out of whatever is happening in B and C that doesn't feel good because of A. And then what the brain does is it builds and like to think about it is it adds a new neural freeway that goes when something happens that feels like something negative. So going to our stock analysis, when the markets dip, which they might again tomorrow or later today, who knows? If the brain's now added a new neural freeway that says when the markets dip, I go drink whiskey, that becomes a connected neural pathway in the brain. And we lose the relationship with brain body and we're unable to make change and have choice. when something happens, or the C piece. And so
So
it's our
it's
brain protecting us from just by making sure we're dissociated from the pain, but there can be pretty severe alternative and outcomes to that because of it. So we can
okay.
break the
Market goes
situation.
down. My response is
Mhm.
let me get myself. This is not whiskey, by the way.
Yeah, this is not vodka.
Let me get a drink. Now, the better equation is A plus B equals D,
Yeah,
right?
that's not
So,
desired. Yeah, the desired outcome, what we want,
so
and
what are
that.
the best coping mechanisms or techniques to use to change your C to a D?
Mhm. So there's a concept that I talk about called brain partnership. And the brain partnership moment is when we're noticing a change in the B. The brain and the body are having some sort of neurochemical response. The moment, or a feeling of anxiety, or our brain is ruminating and we're feeling worried.
Mhm.
We're engaging in a behavior we don't want. That self-awareness is then the space for change. So there's a whole bunch of different tools and skills. And that's basically what my book, Healing in Your Hands, is all about. It's a healing program for how to help the brain change the emotions, even physical pain responses, because the brain's heavily involved in those. How do we change the harmful thoughts that we're having? How do we reduce stress through a combination of what's called mindful touch motions, you know, butterfly taps, and then different cognitive reframing. And then one of my most favorite and one of the most powerful things is also self-compassion. I believe that self-compassion creates the space for the rest of the system to change and to build that D.
Okay, so let's stick with the market. Someone is,
Yeah.
watching what's going on in the markets, the economy in the last, 3 days up until today, tremendous volatility like we haven't seen since 2020, since the pandemic. You can
Yeah.
even look at the pandemic as
Hmm.
another one. So a person is, kind of like locked in on CNBC or just can't stop watching and watching the markets
Hmm.
go down. They have tremendous anxiety. They're all frozen. Um, what what can they do? What can they do to
Yeah.
get out of this? I mean, they can come speak to us and speak to me. We
Yes,
can help you with that.
of course. As we
That's
talked
one
about,
thing.
that's a big
That's
part
one
of
thing.
what you.
That's one thing. But outside of that, if they don't want to do that, if they're just looking at and they know intellectually like this is going to go up, it's going to go down, but still there's an anxiety
Yeah.
for that person. What
Hmm.
can they do to relieve it? Is it that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Well, and so first I want to highlight what you said, Mark, which I think is one of the greatest gifts of any of the clients who work with you and your team is you really truly provide relational support. Our brains are designed to be in relationship with other humans.
Mhm.
And when that feeling, when those emotions are designing the way our thoughts are showing up, we may know something, but it doesn't matter what we know because our feelings are more powerful. A really wonderful opportunity is to take advantage of the relationship with somebody who has the wisdom that our brain may not be able to access in that moment. So that's a
Okay.
really, really critical point. And that's a part of what I know you've built into the way you provide support and care for your clients. It's very smart because we lose our objectivity when
Yeah.
our emotions and survival, finance, money and survival, they are,
Yeah, the emotional money is a very
yeah.
emotional
Oh, it's huge.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
people that are in retirement or about to go into retirement because
Hmm.
you don't have that same paycheck that's coming in or the money that's coming in. So it's
Terrifying.
fight or flight type of situation.
Exactly. Yeah, literally, it is fight or flight. It feels like a threat to life, which is a lot of what we were and hearing about even in my own clinic here in Los Angeles this past week and for the past several months. People are feeling a threat and it feels like life and death threat.
Mm.
So finding on a larger global space, it's finding somebody to connect with.
Okay.
The best thing somebody can do is to turn the TV off, put the phone down,
Yes.
because screens do change the way our brain is functioning, and it pulls us out of our ability to think clearly.
Mhm.
So screens in of themselves play a role in keeping us even more deeply stuck.
It's funny you say that. During the pandemic,
Mm,
which was something unusual and different.
yeah.
Every day I had CNBC on my screen, and and it kind of got to me. Markets were closing and
Yeah.
stopping after a 7% move on the downside. And then I was talking to my partner Peter Klein, and he just said, "Turn the screen off."
Turn it off.
And he was so right. He was so right. I was able to focus and understand, and whatever I needed to research that I need to do, I can do on my own, not have this talking heads talk at me. So that's
Yeah.
that's a that's a very smart thing to say.
Yeah. Well, and partly what happens when, especially when we're watching TV, is our brain interprets that person as a relationship that we have.
Hmm.
So there's an even stronger emotional pull as we're watching somebody talk on a TV versus even reading a news article online. We have more objectivity, but to the same token, put it down, turn it off.
The other part, when I look at CNBC, what's their objective? Their objective is to have
Mhm.
people watch.
Yeah.
So in the negative times, people watch more because it's negative. So they're going to give more negative news. So it's a
Mhm.
it's a loop that they keep up, and it's great for them because they're going to get more advertising
Yeah.
dollars, right?
Yeah. Well, they're leveraging the fact that, and this is an important piece of all of this, our brains, all of our brains have built into it something called a negativity bias,
Mm,
which means that over the course of evolution, since humans have been roaming around this planet of ours, our brain has been designed to look for scary, threatening things and to prioritize those things to ensure we stay alive. And money, volatility, threat to retirement, threat to family, threat to all of those things tap right into that negativity bias.
mm.
And the news cycles, they know this. The media companies know this, and they harness it, they leverage it. And that's where it's really critical to reach out to a person we know or to put it down. And that's where we can bring in, you mind this, that mindful touch and doing some breath work or just even some self-compassion and saying, turning inward to ourselves and going, yeah, this is scary. It's okay. This is reasonably scary.
But it's
And
okay.
but
Let,
it's
let yourself
okay.
know that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gentle reminder, I tell myself all the time, like, it's okay, baby girl. It's okay. A key part of self-compassion is, and this is true for resilience too, their skills. We're not neurobiologically wired. So we're not born into this world with resilience or self-compassion. We have to learn them and then
Mm,
practice them. Whereas fight, flight, freeze, those are automatic. We're born with those. We're born with a negativity bias that teaches our brain to always look for the hard, scary thing, and then even make up stories that could make that hard, scary thing even scarier and worse and more traumatizing, because our
yeah.
brain's kind of wacky and counterintuitive that way. What it's trying to do is keep us alive by identifying the worst thing that could happen so that we can
Hmm.
prepare. But in the moment, it feels really awful. And that keeps us in the doom scroll, or that keeps us locked in on the news cycles or whatever talking head is throwing even scarier data at us.
Interesting. You always go to the worst possible
Yeah.
scenario, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
so go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, moving a little bit away from that for a second. I wanted to ask you is it okay if I ask you a real life scenario that's happening to one of my friends?
Yeah.
Would that be
Yeah.
okay?
Yes. I'm not giving medical advice or consultation, but I'm happy to. Case studies are
Yeah,
useful for
just
all
just
of us.
looking. Okay, this is not a real life friend. It's just a made up case study.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Okay.
Yeah. We're all human.
Uh, right. So, I'll give you the scenario. One son, so it's a couple. One son is in the 30s, has an addiction.
Yeah.
The other son was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Mm.
Um, in his late teens, and he's also 30 something, and he's the older of the two kids. The parents, as you can imagine, are going through very difficult times.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, the parents don't agree on what to do. The mom says, "This is my children. I want to be there for them. I want to help them out." Um, and the dad is, well, he says he's more of a realist. He's been through tremendous uh, trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The addicted son, he had to call the cops on, and they took him away because he's been dangerous a
Yeah.
few times.
Yeah.
He feels like he's given it his all, and for his own sanity, he's kind of washed his hands with his
Mm-hmm.
kids. They're now living separate distances away, and the father doesn't want to live with the wife anymore. He doesn't know what or how to approach his wife, and they are people of means, so there's the conversation about money as well. So there's a lot to unpack here,
Yeah.
but what would you say to in this made-believe situation? What would you say to the father?
And say to whom? To the father.
To the father, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the starting point here is there is clearly so much trauma, as you highlighted. Also, I would imagine a lot of grief. And so often the grief gets missed in these types of high intensity emotional situations that are quite literally life and death.
Mm,
And so holding space and recognizing the combo platter of those two experiences is going to be really, really critical. Traumatic grief. We often think about grief as being death loss, but there's also a type of grief called ambiguous loss, which is where relationships continue to persist.
mhm,
We're living alongside those relationships, and there isn't a closure. There isn't a reconciliation, and there can also frequently and usually is survivor's guilt tied into that. It's a different version of survivor's guilt, but
mm,
it's the I should have done this, I should have done this, what did I do wrong? And holding so much misplaced responsibility that clouds the brain and its ability to be actually showing up in the present
mhm,
and taking care of oneself. And so instead, we're living in again, that fight, flight, freeze state of chronic stress, which then has a domino effect across all of the relationships, no matter what. It's when we're not in our brain, in our body, in a grounded way, it's almost impossible to show up in any version or any part of our life in a way that feels good for us. And not good as in, I feel great. This is a really, really painful situation, but in a way that feels centered and like we're connected to who we are and making choices from that space. And so finding support, a therapist, finding but whatever is the journey, and having really amazing friends
mm,
that can help us unpack and navigate these scenarios is a very important part of the path forward. It's a
mm,
devastating situation. I've worked with a number of families like this, and it's the parents are so focused on saving their children's lives for so long that they lose themselves,
mhm.
and then the opportunity is to be like, oh wait, me. But that can feel really,
They probably feel guilty, like even talking about themselves when the kids are going
yeah,
through that, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
And yet
tough.
that's the most important thing, is saying, oh wait, I'm here, I matter.
Yeah.
And also processing the loss of the hopes and the expectations, the what should have been but wasn't.
Mm, right. That's also probably a loop in their heads. I should have done
Mm-hmm.
this. Should have done. Why did I do this? Why did I do that? Why? Yeah, I can
Yeah,
understand
and
that.
also that raging at the world in a way
Mm,
of why are my hopes and my dreams not coming into the world with these children the way I had imagined this would be, and holding space for the fact that it's heartbreaking.
yeah,
That's a huge part of the grief and the loss. It's heartbreaking.
yeah, it is. Well, thank you, thank you for
Yeah.
that. A different question. Maybe this relates to you, and if not,
Mhm.
tell me it doesn't. Let's say someone comes in and says, I feel like I'm losing it. I walk into a room and I forget why I came into that room, or my memory's not that good, or I forget people's names. Is that an early sign of dementia? Is it just aging? Is it something else, and can this be reversed?
Yeah. Or it could be all of the above.
Hmm. Okay.
So we have a little tiny part of our brain called the amygdala. It's one of my areas of specialization. And Amy, as I lovingly call her, it plays a huge role in designing our stress responses, all of our emotional states. And so when she starts to become overactive, whether it's because we start to notice that we're having memory problems, she's going to come online and get more overactive.
Hmm.
It's because we're going through something hard and we don't feel like we have choice or control or the ability to make change, she'll become overactive. And anything that challenges our ability to be present and have agency in our world, she can start to have opinions about. And so that's always a piece of data I share with my clients. And anytime we're noticing neurobiological changes that continue to go on and we're not in the middle of an acute stressor, that
Hmm.
is an opportunity to go get a physiological workup and just get the blood work done, see what's going on. There's a lot of chronic stress can stay so present, and it feels like, oh, this is just really stressful, but it accumulates in the brain and it
Hmm.
accumulates in the body. And so the more we're living in chronic stress, the greater the impact on the way our brain is functioning. And
You're
then
saying that if
tell
you
stories
take
about
care
it.
of this stress, that all of a sudden you'll start remembering people's names. You won't go into a room and potentially.
It plays a role. And then that's also where looking at resilience, how are we training our brain
Hmm.
to have these skills? So I'll use a personal example. I had a brain virus when I was 30 years old, 30 to 31, called encephalitis, and which is basically really severe swelling in the brain. Most people don't survive. And then I had brain damage from it. And I had to really focus on retraining my brain and building in new skills and hacks. And this is an extreme situation to have the opportunity to do the work I do now. So, for example, on my notes on my iPhone, I have really specific notes on almost every interaction I have with somebody if I'm in a public setting, because my brain stopped synthesizing and synapsing at some point. Or even with this car accident, my brain's not its best self right now. And so
Hmm.
leaning more fully on these brain hacks. And but that also creates a space for self-compassion to just be like, okay, my brain's being a little wacky right now. It's a little different right now. But rather than having Amy get scared and feel threatened, it's getting curious and helping our brain build resilience through finding new tools and techniques. As we age, our brains slow down. That's normal.
Hmm.
But if we freak out about it, we're just going to make it worse.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I listen to a lot of podcasts, guys like Tim Ferriss. They talk
Yeah.
about psychedelics, psilocybin, ketamine, that can kind of recreate the neuroplasticity of the brain, open it up.
Yeah.
There's studies that show that, help people with addiction or smoking habits and so on. Of course, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
We know. But I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. I think that my guide that I tell everybody is work with a provider who is trained. That's my go-to statement. I know here in LA, I don't know what it's like in New York, but here in Los Angeles, there's mail order ketamine. And that to me is very terrifying. Yeah, exactly. So
Sounds scary.
yeah, and a huge part of why I request, like, if people are going to do it, that's my statement is If we have trauma that hasn't been processed, and that happens, we can live a full thriving life having survived really, really, really awful things. Good job, brain. It's pretty cool that way.
Mhm.
But putting our brain into an altered state like that can sometimes open up Pandora's box
Mhm.
or expose us to different types of psychological or other experiences that we don't have the skills nor are prepared to navigate while we're in the altered state. So I've seen it be immensely helpful for clients. I've heard it be immensely helpful even for friends and colleagues of mine. And make sure that you're working with somebody who really has the skills to go on that journey. The cool
So,
thing about the use of mindful touch is that this creates an electrochemical change. So when we're gently rubbing our face, so, think about if you ever have a headache or if you ever wipe a tear away, these touches actually change the way our brain is processing information. And this becomes almost like gasoline for positive neuroplasticity, for helping our brain go in the direction we want without utilizing substances. And so that's a holistic way to get to some of those same spaces.
I mentioned neuroplasticity. You just mentioned it. Just for the audience, I'm sure they're very smart people. They know what it is, but let's just go over what that is and the importance of it.
Yeah. So our brain is malleable. It changes itself across the course of our life for really positive ways. Before my dearest Nana passed on, she had an Apple iPhone. Now, I can bet you that when 1922, that wasn't something her brain knew how to handle.
Right.
So,
Right.
and our brain also is neuroplastic around stress and prioritizes stress. That's a specific type of stress informed neuroplasticity. But no matter what, our brain is learning and changing and shifting the way it's connecting those building blocks
Mhm.
across the course of our life. To your question about cognitive functioning, especially as we age, our brain gets a little stickier as we grow
Mhm.
older.
Okay.
And so that's where utilizing some of these physiologically based tools to enhance neuroplasticity can be really helpful. But that's also why stress can feel bigger for some people and why resilience development and stress management is really, really important and helpful. Plus, if our brain's got a neural pathway for a belief system and we're 75 years old, it's going to be really committed to that neural pathway, which means that it might be a little harder to unhook that belief system and build in one that we want instead. So our
And
brain
ha-
changes. It's great. Thank goodness.
and how about meditation? Does
Meditation
meditation
is so
help?
powerful. Well, I know you're a longtime meditator.
Yes, I
May
am.
I ask you, how does it help you?
Oh, good question. I think that gives me calmness. So that when we have things like we're going through right now in the marketplace, I can be the calm captain of the ship as the waves smashing into the boat. So I think it
Yeah.
gives me a great calmness to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you first started meditating,
It was hard. It was
yeah,
hard. I
why?
was thinking about everything.
Yeah.
What's going on here? What's this meditation all about? This is silly. I'm just sitting here closing my eyes and nothing's going on.
It wa-
But I learned over time to
yes.
get it
Yes.
right.
You built the skill
Yes, that's
and
correct.
that trained your brain. So that's neuroplasticity.
Oh,
And
there you
I
go.
want to reflect that meditation for so many people, and for almost everybody I've ever met who's a meditator, when they start, meditation is really, really hard because we have a squirrel brain and our brain is bouncing all over the place.
Right.
And so that's where I mentioned my YouTube channel. I have hundreds of guided meditations that are anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes long. And in those meditations, I invite in the use of mindful touch because that creates a focus point. It does many, many things, as we've already mentioned, but it's also giving the attentional part of our brain a job while focusing in on a guided experience of my voice and the music and the sensory experience.
Mm.
which stops the squirrel brain from bouncing around everywhere, because the brain's like, oh, the acorn that I want, if it's a squirrel, is the soothing touch and the visualizations or the breath work that we're being walked through. That can start the ability for the brain to harness the neural pathways needed for more in-depth, independent neural meditation. And so it's a little bit of a hack, going back to the idea of hacks,
Mm-hmm.
to start to
Mm-hmm.
build those neural freeways and create success and to feel the success internally. I'm all about gold stickers. I don't care how old anybody is. Gold stickers feel great. Our brain
So,
loves them.
so with that gold stickers, how do you measure treatment or outcomes and the effectiveness of therapy for stress-related disorders? Do you give someone a gold star?
Sometimes,
Oh,
sometimes I
okay.
give myself a gold star.
Oh, there you go.
Sometimes I'm like, good job, brain. You get a gold star today. So yeah, actually, we're looking at some of what we've already spoken about: cognitive functioning,
Mhm.
clarity of thoughts, self-directed effort. So motivation, choice. One of my favorite concepts is agency. So rather than being back and defensive, it's being like, I can make change in my world. I have personal agency or empowerment.
Mhm.
And you'll notice I'm not talking about any of those general depression or anxiety or those concepts. What I'm
Mhm.
talking about when I'm looking at treatment outcomes and when my team's doing this work is we're looking at the positive gains to weather the storm if anxiety shows up, or if depression shows up, or
Mhm.
to the point of this really severe car accident I was just in. I have PTSD, and driving right now is really hard for me. I've driven independently twice. Good job, brain.
Mhm.
And rather than going into a dark spiral around my brain's capacity to get in a car and do something I've been doing since I was 14 and a half, because in Kansas, you can drive at 14 and a half.
Oh, wow.
That's
That's
over
awesome.
30 years of driving.
Wow.
My brain has the ability to instead go, oh, okay, this is the journey right now. And it feels awful and I don't like it.
Mhm.
But I also can know that I can get on that self-compassion freeway that will make the trauma less impactful, and phone a friend, go to
Yeah.
therapy, get help.
Yeah. Interesting. What are some of the misconceptions or common misconceptions about PTSD and complex trauma that you've encountered in your practice?
The most common one is that it's forever.
Oh.
No,
Hmm.
and part of that is actually a fault of the mental health field, and not having, I mean, it's not fault, it's like we didn't do it intentionally. We just didn't have the science to know how malleable and changeable the brain is, because the science wasn't there yet. And so a lot of people were raised with the belief that the brain is locked in and permanent, that it is concrete. And so for individuals who experience a traumatic experience that changes their sense of safety in the world around them, because of the dialogue in the culture and in the field of mental health, it we were taught that that's permanent. And that's a huge part of what we're trying to unwind. The other piece that goes hand in hand with that is that if somebody's having mental health issues, there's something wrong with them.
Hmm.
It's the shame.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest things that I think about, and I talk about this a lot, and I do a huge amount of work in suicide awareness and prevention. There's a great organization here called the Matthew Silverman Foundation. You might know Ron Silverman. Um, that's his foundation.
Oh,
And I was very honored to receive an award, Matt's Award, a couple of years ago.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I get tearful just thinking about it. It's such a huge, incredible honor. And when I was speaking at the acceptance, I pointed out, and I had so many people reflect back to me, and this is some of your audience, as you know. A lot of these guys who are at this event, it was a huge golf tournament, came up to me and they're like, so wait a minute, we should be able to talk about anxiety the same way we talk about a cholesterol medication. Yeah, imagine what that world would look like.
Hmm.
'Cause-
More open. Yeah.
yeah, because we talk about our statins. Are we on what are we using for our cholesterol? But do we talk about what we're doing for our anxiety or our stress?
No.
No.
No. Keep it tucked in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just the brain being a brain.
And can you explain, I mentioned it earlier, can you explain the relationship between nature and nurture?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really, really powerful and important data point. So we all come from humans that came before us, some of us all the way back to the Neanderthals.
Mhm.
And there's something called epigenetics, which is kind of the daily life changes. And then we know about our genetics. And so going all the way back as far as we can in our ancestral lineage, those experiences of those people play a role in how we show up in our lives now, whether it be brown hair or a predisposition to addiction or schizophrenia.
Mm.
Again, not too different, honestly, in terms of genetic expression in some respects. What is different is that, especially in mental health, nature, our environment, can play a foundational role. And then, nature is what we're born with, and then nurture, our environment, can play a role to help certain types of genetics express themselves. So in a way, it's if I wanted to go blonde, I can go dye my hair blonde. I tried it once, wasn't a great look, but I can change that. That would be a version of me changing my nature through a platinum hair dye. That's not very
Mm.
nurturing, but it's a really baseline example. In spaces of chronic stress, if we have a predisposition to anxiety, that can actually make anxiety stronger, or if more likely that we actually develop a quote unquote disorder, as we call it in the field of mental health. So our nature is what we're given, but it's not a life sentence.
Mhm.
We can partner with our system to change it through neuroplasticity, through meditation, through
Mm.
self-awareness, through having healthy relationships, through identifying our own patterns that don't work for us and building new ones. And that's the really powerful opportunity. So we're
Yeah.
born with a thing, and we can partner with that thing to co-create a world that works for us.
Ah, that sounds wonderful. Anything you're studying now that's new and cool?
Oh, so much. Um, one of my, what I really, part of the work that I really, really love to do and have for a very long time is leadership, and how we can support leaders in co-creating cultures within their organizations that have a trickle-down effect into the family system. As a CEO of a multi-million or billion-dollar company, touches not only the lives of their team, but the life of every person that their team interacts with.
Mm.
And really exploring the systems impact of that trickle down effect, and how can we help leaders give themselves, in some respects, permission to show up and care for themselves and proactively participate in the development of a company culture that has that trickle down effect in a way that supports both organizational growth outcomes, what the company needs to be doing in order to exist so people have jobs and there's contribution to the greater world,
Mm.
but bringing in that meaning making and that purpose, and then doing that specific, because that's not new, that's been around for a long time, but doing it through intentional neuroplasticity. And so the systems start to have a co-creation, kind of like a beehive, that
Mhm.
transforms at a neurobiological level the foundation of how everybody's working cohesively together, and
So,
destigmatizing mental health while we're at it.
so that's really not just working one-on-one. Now you're working on, like you said, Beehive,
Systems.
you're working on
Yeah.
many, many people, and that's great. That's groundbreaking. Um, Anything I forgot to ask, anything that I should have asked? Is there any questions, anything that you want to talk about, any other new and cool things that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I've just been really reflecting on is, we are all strapped into a roller coaster right now, and that counterintuitively is a huge request for being gentle with ourselves and
Mm,
each other. And
yeah,
it's that combo platter.
yeah, that's soothing, and that's great, great words, and
Yeah.
really that's amazing. And I just have to really, I know that you've been having your struggles, and you had the accident, and you have a lot of issues, and I can't tell you how appreciative I am, and the people that are going to be watching this over time and today, for you to be such an amazing guest. And when you give these words of wisdom, it really goes out to the community, and then that has a trickle effect. So I really think that you're doing wonderful work, God's work, if you will. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the audience for watching, and with everything happening that's going on in this world, we talked about next Coffee with Krav. We're going to have a someone that has economics
Mm,
and political world and
right.
world events. So I don't have a date yet, so just stay tuned. But until then, have a coffee, relax, smile, find some peace in this interesting time. So again, Dr. Kate,
You.
thank you so much. You take
Yeah.
care.
Joy and an honor. Thank you.